Hello, I'm Kalyan Karmakar, and welcome to my show, Foodocracy for Her. This is a podcast which features women in the world of food in India, and it's the longest running podcast covering this subject, and probably the only podcast doing so. My guest today is someone whom it is tempting to describe as a diva of Indian food writing and the Indian food world. But the only thing is, through personal experience and by meeting her, I've known that she's really a very warm person, very encouraging, very helpful. And I'm talking of someone who's written 20 books, who's known as the Salad Queen of India, and done various TV shows. And I'm talking of Karen Anand. And with no ado, let's move on to Pune to speak to Karen and at her home base. So we are off to Pune by Zoom, and there is Karen. It's so lovely to have you on board. It's so lovely.
Thank you.
Karen's written a very lovely book very recently, and we're going to be discussing this very soon. I hope this is not showing in reverse on your
No, that's correct.
because in my side is screen. So we're going to learn a bit more about Masala Mem Sahib and her story. So Karen, you've got a very interesting beginning. You're a Bombay girl, then went to London, went to Paris. So what is happening there?
Well, that's my life, but it's interesting for when I look back. Of course, it's interesting because it's given me this whole background. I was talking to somebody yesterday, in fact, about culture and in big C, not small C, and background, all that. And actually, I was very lucky when I came back to Bombay. I had these, attributes or whatever, which
Yes.
I didn't realize. I thought that's what I am. But I think having spent, in those days, if you remember, 3,000 years BC, in the 80s, mid 80s, people didn't travel so much. Those were the days where you didn't have a credit card.
Yeah.
You had, $500 to go abroad, all of that. So travel wasn't very common. And people only went if they were either rich or they were businessmen.
Yes.
And I'd come from, from somewhere that was very exciting for me as well, but also for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
So I think that, the beginning helped in terms of career and other things. So yeah, I was born in Bombay. My parents, my father got a transfer and decided to go to America, but they stopped in England on the way, as many Indians did then, and had a rather demanding mother who said, stay on. And they stayed on. And my mother hated England at the beginning.
Wow.
She had traveled before. My father was an engineer on the ships, and he was a captain at that point. And before they had me, and so she had traveled quite a bit, and she'd seen England. And of course, as a chief engineer's wife or whatever, and you're stationed in Belfast for 3 months, and in the UK, you have quite a nice life. But when she went to live there and suffered the cold, and she was quite a diva herself, not in the kitchen because she didn't lift a spoon. She didn't like it at all. So it was quite tough for her. And then when I had a normal schooling, like all Indian parents, they did as much as they could to educate these two girls, and they sent us to what was considered very good schools and all of that. I don't see that happening so much with UK parents. It's only people who are, as I say, well-to-do that would send their children to private schools and so on. But Indian parents want the best.
That's true. And the spelling bee contest, but of course that's
the best, and also what they consider. Listen, it's what everyone in their culture considers the best, right?
Absolutely.
And I, no regrets. And then when I was 18, I decided to do what's called a gap year. Okay. And I went to Paris, and I lived with a family, and I kind of au paired a little bit, was a bit loose. So I kind of helped them a little bit with their little girl. And in return, I got to stay in a fabulous area of Paris. Wow. And I think that has definitely made a huge impression on my life and on what I was going to do. Just that 1 year. And of course, I'd been going to France earlier. I had a pen pal. My mother made sure I would I learned French in school. My mother made sure that I would go every summer to meet this girl. I mean, she was really quite a pushy lady, but quite, I mean, she got things done.
Yeah. And in a way, it's good you stayed back in England, so you didn't have to get confused about your spelling. If you've gone to the US, you have to
That's
learn
true.
English
That's
once
true.
again. American.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, so I spent a year in Paris, but as I said, I've been quite often to France before that. So after that year, my French, I was bilingual completely because I was at the Sorbonne. And then also being in this French family, I spoke French 24 hours a day. So it was great. So accomplishment. And then I came back and did university in the UK.
If I can just stop you there, because
Sure.
something interesting about your Paris sojourn, which I saw in the book. And the two things. One was that going to Paris or going to France sort of made you realize that both men and women cook. So unless like what you saw in India. And actually, my father was in the UK for about 14 years. He was the one who taught my mom to cook when she got married and went there. So that's one point. The other point was you discovered that you can cook and you can cook Indian food despite not having had a grandmom who'd cook Indian food around you. most sort of authors or chefs say that they've learned everything from their grandmoms. But
No. I didn't have grandmothers around.
Yeah.
So well, I had one in the UK, but she lived with an uncle, so I very rarely saw her, and she didn't really get on that well with my mother. So it was just on family occasions. The other grandmother of mine, I believe, was a very good cook, but she was in Goa and then in her last years in Bombay, so I had no contact with her. My mother didn't cook, so I really had Madhu Jaffrey, Madhu Jaffrey mummy, and Madhu Jaffrey's books.
Yes.
And her first book, I think it wasn't The Taste of, it was a Indian home cooking book. One of her, I think it was the first book. It was a little paperback, and my mother managed. It's not that she was a terrible cook. She managed what she could. She would, I talk in the book about Patak's masala, She had these Kashmiri masalas which went into everything. When she came to India on holiday or anybody was traveling, there was a lady called Mrs. Kenny, I think, in Baikala, who would make dry masalas, Buffat masala, and things for Anglo-Indian, Mangalorean, East Indian, Goan food, that sort of diaspora. So my mother would get all these, and I don't think it's a bad idea. They were very nice. They were freshly ground, And so one of those would go into everything. And my father, being an Indian, also my mother actually, loved their Indian food. And it wasn't really defined by any region because they came from Bombay. So they liked Bombay food. They liked samosas and pav bhaji and vada pav and things like that. And of course, they liked their Goan food. But they also liked anything that was Indian, anything spicy, Those were not the days where you could get things in Marks and Spencer's or, which you can today. You wouldn't go out, they wouldn't go to there was no fine dine Indian restaurant.
That's right.
So there was Southall and Wembley and places like that. So yeah, I mean, they hankered after Indian food. But I learned nothing at home. And I took Madhu Jaffrey with me to Paris.
Yes.
And then there I would go through, her book, and because people said, oh, you're Indian. Why don't you cook Indian? And of course, I didn't know any Indian food.
Yes.
But that's where I learned also the basis of my French cooking and really what I wanted to bring to the table when I came back to India. So that 1 year was very important, yeah. And then I went, I actually got into Cambridge, oddly enough. I never told my father, but I didn't choose Cambridge because they wouldn't let me defer. Okay. And I wanted to go to Paris. So I went to Sussex, which gave me a, unconditional offer. And I went primarily, when you're young, you're so stupid. You base your decisions on very strange things. So my decision was based on the fact that Sussex University was very near the coast. And therefore I could hop along to Paris very often. And in those days, we just took the ferry or the what's the other thing? Not the ferry. There was that hovercraft or whatever.
Yes, the hovercraft.
So we could get to Paris in 5 hours, kind of thing, on this hovercraft and train, or even I think 4 hours actually. So I based my decision of where I went to university on how easy it was to get to Paris every 6 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I was wondering was if you look at the 20 books you've written,
Yeah,
one series which really interests me is the simple cooking. And I think you started with simple cooking for men and
correct.
then went into different areas. So I was wondering whether your journey of learning how to cook, you know, sort of led to the simple cooking series, because I mean your cooking was all about practicality, right? Because I remember reading that when you met Jig Scholar, you said that your recipes and food are not lovely, but where will I get all those spices to create those
Well,
dishes?
and Jiggs was on a different thing. His thing was to recreate, old recipes to find. I mean, he was the one who actually, I
Mm.
think, started that whole dumpuk thing, which the
Yes.
ICC is
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
So it was very important what he did, but it was certainly not simple. And my thing was to recreate even Indian food, to
Yes.
recreate simple things, not to make them up. I mean, a lot of the recipes in this book you'll see are very simple.
Absolutely.
That's
Yes.
how we cook at home, and that's how you
Yes.
cook, every day. And a lot of different people are looking at this book, so hopefully they'll be able to choose
Yes.
whether they want a celebration dish or whether they just want something, easy to do.
And I know people are
Simple
doing
cooking
that
was great
because,
fun. Simple cooking was supposed to be a
yeah,
kind of a supermarket takeout book,
yeah, yeah.
and it was actually difficult to do because 12, although it was little books, still 12 little books is quite a lot of work.
And a lot of recipes to think about.
Yeah, especially because I decided
Yeah.
that it would be for the smart men, which I had fun. Then it was the desperate housewife, children. I have a lot of children who come back
Yeah.
to me who are not children now, who
Yeah.
said that was their first book because it cost 100 rupees and it
Yes.
was their pocket money. It's very
And
nice stories.
nothing for the not so smart men. For the
Um,
men.
no, they can also look at the same book.
No man would
It's
like
got
to
lots
admit
of
to
things.
that. No man
Yeah.
would like to admit to being not so smart. Yes.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, so the simple cooking for smart men was just a title to draw the guys in. And it had chapters like, if you want to woo a girl, what might you cook? If you if you have no money at the end of the month,
Yeah.
what do you do? How can you kind of make something interesting with a packet of masala and 4 potatoes kind of thing? So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it.
So you had catchy titles well before the world of SEO and making sort of words go with what's not going in the internet.
Well, in those days, we had to, Kalyan. I mean, we had to think of you're in advertising. We had
Yeah,
to think of catchy things. We had to use the brain.
and I'd also worked in Asian Age for a month after college,
Yeah,
and as a sub ed trainee, and we used to all our fun used to be in formulating the headlines, and that used to be a big part of that.
absolutely.
So how did a girl who suddenly realized that she could dish out kormas and parathas when she went to France, um, how did she become the salad queen when she came back to Mumbai or Bombay?
Well, when I came back to Bombay, I came back, I met somebody and I married him. So it was a kind of fait accompli. I did well, not fait accompli that way. I mean, it was a love marriage and all of that, but it was just here I was in Bombay. I was in a milieu that was very different. It was in a film milieu. I didn't know what it was very exciting, but it was also very strange for me. And I was quite, after that first initial year of excitement in a marriage, excitement with a new place, excitement in a new house, all of that. Then I said, oh, I'd like to get down to work now.
Mm.
And I found that, I'd done international relations and I did French and Russian at uni. There was nothing, absolutely nothing that prepared me for, because basically I had prepared myself to work in Europe. So I thought I would do a stint in UNESCO, and then I had a media job lined up. I did it like you did the internship at Asian Age. I did an internship at Elle in the cuisine section, because the people I lived with when I was on my gap year, he was actually editor of Elle France at the time. So that's what I'd set myself up for. Now I came to India, knew everything, knew as in N, not K, and didn't know what to do. So I applied for things in media, but of course I had no Hindi. There was only Doordarshan in English. I was a little bit lost. And then I met Anil Dakar at a party, and Anil said, "Come and work with me at Debonair." And I said, "Debonair," and he said, "No, I don't want you to be cover girl, but could you write on?" Yeah, he was really sweet. Because when I used to go to like Frank Samoy's to collect his copy, in those days, Frank used to, people used to type.
Yeah.
Frank we had to go and collect his copy.
Yeah.
And no computers and all of that.
Yes.
So Frank used to have this big joke, and we became great friends with Frank and Leela. Have you come to, what do you do at Debonair?
Yeah.
So I started writing a column on food. Because every day, I was writing on various things. I was just mucking around in the office. And I kept bringing these fantastic dabbas every day. And Anil would say, "Where does this come from?" And I said, "Home." And he said, "Who makes it?" And I said, "Me." So he would say, "Well, why don't you write? Are you interested in writing on food?" So I don't think I had huge knowledge, but I had more knowledge on, should we say, global food than other people at the time. Because I traveled and I was exposed to so much. So I just decided, okay, I could write on food. And of course, I would do my research. And then also with Gul, who I was married to, we did a fair amount of traveling. We went to China, we went to all sorts of interesting places. And so I just made sure when I was at those places, I kind of, when you have been educated and you kind of know what you should be looking for. So if I went to Bangkok, I would make sure that I would look at ingredients. I would, tie up with a chef to teach me a few recipes. So I would get a hang of the food and ingredients and a little bit of cultural background wherever I was. And that built up my portfolio of knowledge. So it wasn't through a culinary school or anything. So anyway, that's how it started. And then when I came back to India, I found everybody was doing Indian food. Sanjeev Kapoor was around and all that. So I said, what can I do? And I didn't really have any depth of knowledge of Indian food at that time, not in my 20s. So I said, it's really not correct for me to do Indian food. So let me do what I know, which was European food. And I think, I was at the right time, at the right place. European food wasn't very big. We had that Italian restaurant at the President, Trattoria. And we had some chefs knocking around Taj who would do some kind of banquet, English food. So it was, I think it was a breath of fresh air. And salads was something which I was very keen on because it was something that I learned in France. And so, I had 30, 40 salad recipes. And I actually started a salad bar in Pune first.
Okay. So, I was listening to your story and I could empathize at one point because at a much younger age, when I was 8, is when we moved into India. And I had a lot of trouble adapting because the language was new, the food was new, the heat and mosquitoes were new. But the other thing which struck me was that you spoke of yourself as not being someone who was a trained expert, but you're someone who was learning and sort of accepted that and were doing that, showcasing that. Which took me back, and what you were saying is in a way what the blogging movement was all about. My elder cat, Baby Loaf, wants to be on the show. So in a way, well, that's what the blogging movement was all about. It was like people who are not chefs or not into cooking. I mean, people who had jobs which have got nothing to do with food. They would come back and write, and that's where a lot of regional food writing started happening. Because as you mentioned, even in a book launch, that there's still not enough which has been done to document regional food. But where I found the connect is that, when we did the Times of India Kitchen Tales event at Pune before the pandemic, and I'd invited you and we very kindly come over, and you sort of stayed on till the end, which was till lunch. And I could see that a lot of people, the bloggers, people who love food and everyone were going up to you. And I noticed that how warmly you sort of welcomed them, as if now that I feel that probably you felt, I don't know, maybe a sort of empathy because you were one of them at one point.
Yeah, and I think I have a very well, I wouldn't say firm opinion, but I have an opinion on bloggers because I think on the one hand, we all started, yeah, some of us had a little bit more advantage. Travel is a huge advantage.
Yes.
And as you know, and I see girls now blogging. I'm saying girls because I know girls more than boys, blogging and cooking. And then they come up with this sort of, these sort of expert opinions. And, it's taken me a long while, as it has you, to get to the point where I have an opinion on certain things.
Yes.
The opinion is based on experience, it's based on education, it's based on taste, it's based on many years of all of this.
Yes.
So while I totally empathize with bloggers and I totally understand that they want to learn, and you have to spend time doing these things.
Absolutely.
It's not, so I sometimes get a bit irritated with kids in their mid-20s calling themselves experts or calling them, you can say I'm discovering Bangkok or I'm,
absolutely.
but calling themselves chefs, for example. And that's more often men, boys, in their 20s, calling themselves chefs. I know French chefs who said we had to work 13 years hard slog in a kitchen before we could even utter the word chef,
Or the Japanese and, sushi. In this documentary, Jiro Loves Sushi or something like that, where his son had to go through almost 20 years of just rolling the rice. Yeah.
There you are. Till you can call yourself an expert or a chef or a food writer. And and food writers, they say, oh, you taste food. No, I mean, I really, in a way, when I was doing the Times, the Pune Times column for I think I did it for 7 years or something. It was tough because some restaurants are very good, but some aren't.
Yes.
And you still have to taste the food and you still have to comment. And it's a bit like art, someone has put their soul on the wall or somebody or an installation. And you can be truthful, but you can't be harsh. And I find food is like that. If somebody's cooked something, they may not be, you have to let them down gently. You really do. You can't say that's a load of rubbish. It might be, but you can, there are ways of saying that, like art, you can say something's descriptive. So similarly, you can say, tastes great, but maybe I would have done this, or maybe you could have done that. Or do you think it's really authentic, or is it your take on? You learn these things. But that's my only thing about blogging and writing today, because when we were younger, we had a column in a newspaper. So I did Debonair, I did, oh God, so many, Man's World, Indian Express, all columns.
And the Telegraph Now.
Telegraph Now I do, and I do Global Spa when I do something wellnessy, because, health is still a concern to me. And I can't, and I did HT for 3 years till a year ago. That was every week, which became a bit much for me, but it was ingredient based, which is interesting. But I've done almost all these magazines. I was food editor of Elle for the first 2 years. So there we would do editorial pieces as well as the 4 recipes which we would, take out and which you could keep in a kind of folder. So I've done all of that. So we used to write, and writing in a way, when you do it for a magazine or a newspaper or online, it gives you a discipline, right? You have to read your work back. You have to do all of that.
Sometimes fit it within certain.
Correct. Correct. With blogging, I don't feel it's so disciplined. So a lot of the time people are waffling. They're writing a lot on stuff which is not so, not so important.
I'm guilty of that too. But you learn with time. I must say, I was talking to my mom a couple of days back, and she started blogging a few years back. She on my blog, and then she has her own blog, Tabulous Mom.
What's her own blog?
Tabulous Mom. Tabulous Mom. So
what's it about?
So it's very interesting. It's pretty eclectic. It started initially with the stories of her life. It's a very interesting story because she grew up in Delhi, became a sort of college teacher there, then had an arranged marriage with my father. So went all the way to UK, Canterbury, completely different thing from Delhi, Panda Road. From there, they moved to Iran, where with my dad went to work there. He was a doctor. Again, a completely different sort of milieu. And then the revolution happened and they had to leave. And that's when my dad said that he wanted to come back to India. So
Mm.
she came to Calcutta as well. And she'd never been to Calcutta. Very different from life in Delhi, even 15 years back, though there was a gap. My dad passed away early. So then she brought the two of us up. And then she used to go to college in Howrah. I mean, Calcutta to an extent. So, it would be almost 1.5, 2 hours both ways. So it's just, I mean, nothing to do with this, but it's just that I was sort of putting this together and I was saying that, wow, I mean, for us, the irritation is if the power, not even the power in Bombay, the power also doesn't go. But yeah, so she was telling me about her blog, and she was revisiting some of her articles which she'd written about Iran or UK and all of that, so, and working on them. So I said, "What are you doing now?" So she said, "No, I just feel that when I started writing, they were pretty long pieces, but that's fine for a book. But I'm trimming it down now because people want to get to the point." So I think that what you said about waffling, uh, yeah, I mean, once I started getting the hang of writing, initially they were like Instagram size posts, but then I went into very detailed stuff about search for biryani in Lucknow and this that.
Yeah, I saw that of yours. Yeah.
But
It's very important and it's very, whereas mine, because I came from a background where I had to keep doing essays and essays
yeah,
and essays. A friend of mine joined HBO in the old days, and he was with me at uni. And I said, "What's it like?" He said, "It's like I have to do proposals for new shows."
wow,
He said, "It's just like uni. We're just writing essays, but we call them proposals." So
yeah,
I think when I first started writing on food, it was a bit like that, except I made sure that it would not be over. I think the discipline of 800 words
yeah, yeah,
is very important.
that's true.
So once you know that your limit is 800 words, now I think it's even less. I think people read less.
Yeah,
They want visuals, but they want 400 words max. Although most of my articles are 800, but I think the days of 2000 is gone. I remember I used to write for India Today
yeah.
in their travel section. And I remember they used to say, we want a minimum of 2000 words. I think those days are gone.
I'd written a book on, post on Maharashtrian cooking,
Mm.
and that had become pretty long. So for NDTV and online. So I said, "Do you want to cut it into two?" So they said, "No, let this be the way it is, so that if people want to sort of get information on Konkani food, it'll be there." But when I wrote for press like Femina, Times of India, Indian Express, and all of that, I think that's where the discipline came in. That how to sort of make a point in 800 words, 600 words, 400 words. But
Mm.
talking of press, I mean, a very famous sort of TV show which you did, the Good Food Show, and
Yeah,
it
good idea.
quite a bit, and it was probably fairly novel for its time to someone travel
I think
across
it was the
India.
first food and travel show. I think
Yeah,
food, Sanjeev Kapoor started around the same time, but he was doing, the
cooking.
recipe show.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anybody that did, and thanks to Peter Mukherjee, because he was at Star at the time and headed, I think, what did he head Star? Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah.
And we used to meet socially, and he said, I think you'd be great on a food travel show, and he got a producer and he put it together, and it worked. And I think it was one of the first. I mean, it was cowboy time. We used to make it up as we went along, and Siddharth
And how
Kapoor
did you find that? Sorry, how did you find that traveling across India? Because you are sort of exposed to one sort of life, but when you're traveling across India and like 10 years back, it's very different, right? Like you said, cowboy,
yeah, it's
Wild Wild West.
a bit rough and ready. It was okay.
Hmm.
People are very respectful to women when you travel, and I find that's nice. And it's fine. I mean, and often I would stay with friends, or there were no budgets for anything, so
Right.
I would stay with friends or stay with families, or that kind of positive view. But yeah, it was just like if you're in the hot sun, that was more unpleasant. You're in the hot sun doing an intro, and the cameraman has run out of battery,
Yeah.
and then you have to repeat it. And then the light guy has gone somewhere, and then you have to repeat it. And then the sound guy's battery is gone, you have to repeat it. So that sort of thing was irritating.
Yeah,
Um,
the battery is like
the batteries, the
yeah,
light, the batteries of each individual person, right? And then the sun goes. So the light needs to change. Yeah, that was a bit, because I'm not an actress. And so,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I think a lot of Madhu Jaffrey's popularity and prowess in a way was because she was an actress. And
Yeah,
so
and
she,
yet she it didn't seem like she was acting, but she knew the ropes. She knew.
oh yeah, I
Uh,
don't think she was such a cook. I mean, Syed Jaffrey told me when, you know, I knew him quite well. And Syed used to tell me that I don't know whether you know the story of how Madhur got on air.
no, I
Well,
didn't.
apparently, Jennifer, who was Syed's second wife, who was English, used to work, I think, as a secretary or something for the BBC. And one of the guys said, you know, we would love to have an Indian food
Mhm.
show. And she recommended her husband, Syed. So Syed went for the interview kind of thing. He was an actor. He
Yeah.
said, listen, I know 5 dishes, mainly Lucknowi food because he was from Lucknow. But really, my wife Madhur, my ex-wife Madhur, is the cook. You know, she really cooks well. She comes from an old Kayast family, etc., etc. So that's how Madhur came into it. And because she was, I don't mean she was an actress in a bad way, but
I know,
you
but
know,
she knew the sort of ropes.
yeah, you
She's
know, the
comfortable in front
energy
of
you
camera.
need because you do something and you can't talk like this. You have a bit of energy when you're doing something. And
Yeah.
I remember when I was doing, you know, my shows, they used to keep saying, no, no, you're flat. Do it again with, and I didn't know
Bring
what
in
they meant.
energy. Bring in
Yeah,
energy.
not an energy, yeah, energy training. And then I kind of understood what they meant. You just bounce up and down a bit, not like a clown, but I have a little bit of modulation in your
Yeah,
voice. All of that as an actress, you would have learned. You
yeah.
would have learned how to breathe. You would have learned how to. I did a bit of amateur theatre in school. I mean, nothing, you know. Learned how to breathe. Learned how to modulate your voice so that people keep listening. Um,
You know, the
Very important.
parallel which comes to mind is, the your Bombay launch and Kunal Vijaykar, who interviewed you and sort of, did the launch. But
Yeah,
he's an actor. He's done theater.
yeah. He's a
He's done TV
comedian.
shows.
Yeah,
So he knows the sort
how
of
to keep an
expressions you
audience.
do. The sort of facial expressions, the voice modulation, and of course he loves food. So
Mm.
that's a great combination together. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, he's very good.
So, before I move to the farmers market, I wanted to ask you, you never considered doing a show for yourself on YouTube or OTT or something like that, or have you put that
You
behind?
know, my life went into different. So I did 3 shows. I did the Good Food Guide. I did something for CNBC on Trendmill.
Yeah,
And then I did another one, called Cook Na Kaho for that
yeah,
channel, Star One or whatever, which
yeah.
never really took off. And then after that,
I
I
remember
think
the name.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was fun.
yeah,
And then after all that, I was probably by then in my early 40s. And I think television is, you know, I think I was still pretty okay in my early 40s, but I think there was a lot of new blood coming in,
yeah,
and television changed. I also got lots of spin offs after television. You know, I got endorsement packages and all sorts of things. My life changed. I moved to Pune
yeah.
permanently because I was sort of 1 foot in Bombay, 1 foot in Pune. My children were growing up. I got some very interesting, I got into consultancy,
Yeah.
um, you know, and I learned a lot along the way.
And you also developed your range of like,
Yes, we started a small factory in Pune. It started from my home, and then it got in, you know, from a garage to a small unit, and so that became quite, you know, quite popular. I mean, popular, but also quite a lot of work for me.
but it just
Um,
stood out in the supermarket. I mean, with the packaging and the sort of,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great fun,
yeah,
and it did very well. And we're still at it. Then we stopped for a few years because we had some legal issues with a partner and so on, and then we got back again. So yeah, but my second husband, he was, you know, he had a business and he was part of Contemporary Arts and Crafts in Bombay. And then he said, no, let's do something with this food thing. You know, it's something you've developed. You've got these recipes, you know, let's. So he actually took it over and is doing it now and runs it. And I think wants to, now it's had enough. But it's a big thing, being an entrepreneur and having ideas, and then actually doing the nitty gritty of running a business, you know.
yes, yes.
So yeah, so when I got, you know, in my early 40s, I was kind of trying half-heartedly to get back into TV. And the people I knew in my mid 30s when I was doing TV had already left or they were doing other things. And then I got into consultancy, which was quite lucrative. I got into, doing our own little factory, which was hard work. And I think for 10 years, I mean, I don't know where the 10 years went. It was also time when I needed to be with my children a bit more, and we moved to Pune. I've been living in Pune since I was 30, but as I said, I had a foot up and down. By then, I decided to settle in Pune, as it were. So there were lots of changes in my life, and I think I just didn't have the bandwidth to go and pitch to Bombay again.
I understand. And what I took out of what you said is that often one tends to be fixated about something which one had done, like, writing or television or, producing something or running a business. But I think what your career shows is that you sort of do what you are enjoying at a particular time of your life. What you might enjoy at one point of your life might not do so, you might not do so in another phase. And it's really joy which sort of drives one, right? I mean,
it is joy. It's joy. It's fun. If you're
yeah.
not having fun, you don't do anything properly,
And the
right?
definition of joy changes, possibly.
Yeah, but you also, let's be frank, as a woman, I think it's important to make money. It's important to have fun. It's important to have a bit of passion. It's important to learn. I'm learning constantly, So I've got a trip planned in July where I want to go to certain things. I mean, I don't know Thailand very well, so I'm discovering a little bit about the East, and I want to know more rather than just restaurants. That doesn't do it for me. I've gone out of that. As you say, joy changes. Joy for me now is not to eat a meal and sit in a restaurant anymore.
Same
it really
here.
isn't. I can't, unless it's an extraordinary meal. I go and see Gagan and talk to him or something. Unless it's something extraordinary. Like I had a friend who had a cook, local cook. She used to take me to the market in Bangkok. I used to look at things with her. We used to come home and cook the dishes. That is joy to me. But joy to me no longer is sitting in a restaurant, dissecting food, looking at very, I don't know about you, but that very styled Michelin kind of food really doesn't do it for me anymore.
True. I mean, when I started writing, I mean, that's what the blog is called, finely chopped. So, you go to restaurants and dissect them. But, I mean, with time, you sort of morph. Okay, one more question before you get into your book. Tell me a bit about the Pune farmers market, because it started well before farmers market became a buzzword, in Bombay and so on.
Yeah.
So what made you start that? What was
as I said, so my 40s was sort of doing all these consultancies. So I consulted for many companies, which I really enjoyed. And I found that I was really good at developing recipes. So I worked for big companies. I worked with Pepsi, I worked with Britannia, developed really, and it gave me huge amounts of confidence, that I could do something for these big international companies. And that I was good at it. And that also helped my business and my food business, because I learned to develop new recipes. So that was a phase in my 40s. And then in my early 50s, I said, okay, done all that. I continued a little bit, but not so much with consultancies, because then I was building up my own business and I found I couldn't do both. So, and I found that, there was so many, we'd been abroad and we keep going to farmers markets, right? Having said that, a lot of farmers markets in Europe now have become really repositories of everything. Yeah. They're not like, I go to one in Lido in Venice where I live when I go, and it has clothes and it has all sorts of things. Yes. So the original farmers markets, as you know, were just food and vegetables and local things. And so I said, we have the local mandi in India. We have the Pune mandi and the Pune markets, but it's not a joyful place where people who are young entrepreneurs can come and show their jams or their pickles or their, and we wanted to make it into a kind of festival, because we'd seen this abroad, to be frank. And I thought there was going to be an audience here. And as with a lot of things in my life, things happened. I was talking to the GM of the Westin Hotel in Pune. They have a beautiful big ground. And he said to me, the Westin also stands for eco and environment. So I'll give you this bit of land at the back and do something. And I did. I never go into anything thinking there's going to be a disaster. I always go into things thinking it's going to be positive. So my husband and I went up to Mahabaleshwar, and we met some farmers, and we said, grow this, grow that, grow the other. And we monitored what they were growing. Typically these what they call English vegetables, were grown, but people didn't know when to pluck them. Yeah. So they would get zucchini that big, they didn't know broccoli that big. So I said, it's not about size, So we trained the farmers, and they came to the market. They would dump their vegetables, had no idea what they were supposed to do. So the first farmers market, we maybe had 15 stalls. And one of the last one, it went up to about 100 stalls.
Wow.
And then people got very excited. And we got offers from Calcutta and from Bangalore and from Chennai, and lots of people, different people who were in charge of malls, who would say, come and do it in our mall. So we made some mistakes. Sometimes the mall format didn't work. Sometimes it did. Hotel formats worked very well, oddly enough. Yeah. And the Westin was still one of the great places because it had a huge ground. So then my son was studying hospitality abroad. He came back. I'm sorry. He came back and he said, why don't we take this to the next level? He was very excited. And since he had a hotel management background, he's very much a doer. And he said, let's take this to the next level. I'd already started incorporating local wines. I'd incorporated local restaurants. So since I was already doing the Pune guide for the Times, I knew all the restaurants through the guide, we'd already given awards to the good restaurants. So I knew which kind of restaurants to pick for the market. So I would pick, one Maharashtrian, one this, one that, and ask them to participate in the market, which was great because then I would say they were award-winning restaurants that we're choosing. So I had that, did all of that. So then it became a much bigger scene. So it became people who wanted to from cupcake girls to people who wanted to launch a new product. For example, I think Paper Boat launched with us in Delhi.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, when they were very small and wanted to see. It was a good marketing strategy for a lot of companies without costing much. Just participation. Yeah.
Yes,
so Paper Boat, that wonderful juice, the Raw Pressery, they launched with us. A lot of people launched.
And these are all successful brands today. Paper
Raw Pressery is now changed, but I think Anuja's thing in the beginning was fantastic. Makeup brands that wanted to do natural makeup. So then from food and beverage only, we went into anything natural. So it got into natural fabrics, not so many. I limited those to like 10 stores. So it didn't look like a sort of flea market. Yeah. Natural fabrics, natural shoes, hemp. There was a guy who had hemp fabrics and clothes, and people bought those, because it was different to just food. Natural bath and body care became very big. And I said okay to that because I think if it's natural, it's the same kind of person. I would go to buy, a cake or a jar of something, but if I'm doing that, I'm also the kind of person that might want a natural shampoo. And so we got a lot of those as well. So it was fantastic. It was great fun. Kalyan, we made a little bit of money, not a lot, enough to kind of cover all our expenses and stuff. We started getting very good sponsorships. But towards the end, I think with what happened was that terrible. So we did it for 8 years, just before COVID. And then we found, of course, COVID stopped it. We also found that, after that terrible tragedy in Bombay at the Phoenix thing, where there was that fire. After that, all the licensing became very difficult. Yes. So, you had to do this enormous licensing for every event, which meant that the commercials went a bit crazy. So, and it was just at that time when COVID was then coming in. So we said, let's take a break. And we haven't started again because I wanted to make sure that COVID was closed because it's now going to take at least 6 months to prepare anything. My son has started something in Pune. He does something called the Pune throughout, which is more a food and drink fest, not so much of the products, but just to keep in. And he does it at the Turf Club. So yeah, maybe next year we start a smaller version, and we maybe just do it in Pune and Bombay.
That's lovely. So looking forward to that. You know, the problem with talking with you is not a problem, but I mean, it's such a beautiful, colorful sort of life of yours that there's so many stories to talk
So
about.
many stories. That's what people say. So many stories. Got so many stories.
That you know, your book, you know, is something which I wanted to speak about.
Yes.
Because in fact, my friend Manisha, who met you, she's been cooking through the book.
Oh, great.
So
Successful, I hope.
no, very successfully. Yes, yes, very successfully. So, tell us a bit about the name, Masala Mem Sahib.
Well, that's me. So it's all about my recipes that I've collected. They're certainly not all mine. They're recipes that I've collected in the last 30 years from various people. Some are traditional, some are twists, some are, one of the recipes is from my driver's,
Yeah, I know that.
mother. So they're a collection of recipes of Indian recipes. And it's all about my life as well. So it's in terms of food, of course. So it's all about how I came into food, why I've now chosen this journey with Indian food after doing Western for so long. It's not that I stopped Western food, I still eat Western food. But I think there is so much in Indian food that we haven't discovered. And I think it needs to be documented.
Yeah, in fact, like you said, it brings out life two different parts of everything. And what I liked about the book is that, of course, it has recipes. I mean, it is a recipe book, but there are anecdotes with, each recipe, or when you're starting a new chapter, with the five sort of regions which you've taken, Calcutta, Goa, Maharashtra, Kerala, you spend a few pages writing about your connection with it, the introduction as well. So there's a lot to read as well, because sometimes if it's just recipes, and if you're not someone who's cooking from recipes like me, then you don't know what to do with the recipe box. But there's so much to read. Was it conscious?
Well, that was the intention. So I hope it's a good read, even if you don't do the recipes.
No, it is. It is. Now, are there any sort of favorite recipes from here, or something you'd want people to cook first?
Well, the last chapter, I always say Goa because I'm from Goa and there are a lot of family recipes in there. But there are family recipes in Gujarat from my husband's family. There's lots of Maharashtrian family recipes. But I think in the chapter on, which is called Memorable Meals, it's got some Parsi recipes, some Sindhi recipes, which didn't fit into a chapter. And I quite enjoyed those, like when I went to Ladakh and I discovered something, when I went to my daughter-in-law's home in Assam, discovered a couple of things there. So that's fun because they're all about stories, but they're all about just snippets of regional food. And there's quite a lot of quite interesting short recipes.
In fact, the other thing which I liked about the book are the quality of, the way it's laid out, or the quality of photographs. I mean, the food as well as the personal photographs. It sort of brings it alive in a way which Indian print books are still not there really. But I mean, it's more like the international standard. Unfortunately, very few in the Indian food books are at that thing. So again, was it a conscious effort?
Oh yeah, that was a conscious effort. I mean, if I had the budget, I would have hired one photographer. I was given a couple of, I knew what I wanted to do. And I was given a couple of references. One was a fantastic book on Venice by, got on my shelf, someone noted. And there's a photographer called Jenny Sarens, Swedish from London, and she has done the whole book. So whether it's the recipes or him walking down a street in Venice or whatever, she's done it. And of course, when you have that kind of budget, she's done also some of the Otto Lengi, I think, Sami Tamimi books on, I think, not Jerusalem, the Palestine book. So when you have that, you have one person's vision of both the recipes and the situation. That would have been my ideal. And that's what I wanted to do. Now, COVID came in, budgets came in, I initially started off with another publisher. They had issues, with all sorts of, went to an agent, etc., etc.
Oh God, I must tell you this, that the book I was working with on The Diary of a Cat Dad, it was with a publisher who works on the crowdfunding sort of this thing.
Yeah,
So they just got in touch with me a week back saying that
yeah.
they're wrapping up the company. So
Great. Oh, wrapping it
yeah,
up. Mm.
wrapping it up. So
Oh, you did say in your message,
yeah,
yeah.
and they refunded everyone.
Mm.
So and that's pretty good. My wife was saying you should come out in public and sort of say that. I was saying that, do you want to
Well,
do
there's
that?
another publisher called Duck Bill or something that does a lot of interesting smaller books for children and stuff. Have you tried them?
Not yet, but like you
I'll
said, I
get you
mean,
the.
with an agent, and then, but
Okay.
I'll definitely keep. This is not a book for kids, though. I mean, it's a book
It's not.
for grown-ups, and a bit
Okay.
like Marley and Me, but in a
Okay.
yeah. So before I finish, and I'm sure you've met a lot of Calcuttans. You've lived there for a
Yes.
short bit.
I've never lived there, but I've worked a lot there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love Calcutta.
And there's a particular thing which you've sort of included, which is a quote from Minal Sen on
Mm.
Bengalis. I don't know if you remember that, but otherwise I'll.
More or less.
Yeah. So
Well,
does
the
that
funny
sort
thing
of,
with Manal is when I met him, I didn't really know who he was. I knew he was a filmmaker.
yeah,
Of course, I'd seen a couple of his films, but I didn't really know the grandeur of it all. And I met
yeah.
him at some coffee shop in Calcutta, and he talks and talks and talks and talks more than I do.
Uh, no, but he sort of said this thing about the Bengali being the one who just stays on till till the shop shuts, and
Mm.
eating plates and
Well, he said lots of things. He also said the Bengali man, the Bengali man cooks, right? Whereas a lot of other Indian men don't cook.
which
But
is
he
true
said
actually.
more than that, he said Bengali men love to shop,
Yeah, the
love to
fish
buy their
shopping and
fish.
the mutton shopping.
Fish shopping,
Yeah,
is a big thing. And then he said to me, you know why? I couldn't put it in the book because it's not really, mentionable.
for sure.
But he said, you know why? And I said, well, why? He said, because, on the way to the brothel, on the way to the market at Garihat, the brothels were just behind or whatever. So they, go there, buy their fish and come back. So the fish was a good excuse for having, a good time as well. So
Yeah.
he came up with lots of anecdotes like that.
In fact, I'll read out what he said.
Mm.
How will you recognize a Bengali? Look around you. We men love to sit in cafes and procrastinate all day long, chatting about any subject. Others will come and go, but the Bengali will only leave when it's time for dinner.
Mm.
And the other thing is that the Bengali man will willingly go is the fish market. So
Yeah.
just before closing, I mean, you've come across many Bengalis for the book you worked with Aninda and Madhu. This thing, Madhu Shifas under this thing.
Well, they were great, as I said.
Yeah.
So since I didn't have one photographer to do everything, I said, okay, what do I do? Then let's make it like a collage. Let's make the intro like a collage with all sorts of pictures from my past. So that makes it, a bit like a storybook. I would still like to do my pet project, which is do one photographer, but that's fine. And then we had COVID. So
Yeah.
I had no photographer could come to Pune. I couldn't go anywhere. We were all stuck at home. So I called Anandita and Madhushri, whom
Aninda.
Anindya and Madhushri, who I'd worked with before on some things in the market. Lovely couple. And
Yeah.
they had just got into photography.
Yes.
And I think what they're doing is very, very precious.
Absolutely,
this
yeah.
whole Bengali blog, and they've really worked very hard at it and deserve everything. And they said, look, we've got proper cameras now and all that. So I said, look, I knew very clearly in my mind how I wanted the shots. They hadn't, because they were working with hotels and restaurants and, tailoring to that. So, we worked, and, because their children are very young and their children were at home because of school being closed, we had to work after 9 o'clock. And after 9 o'clock, I'm half dead, So we had to either work at 7 in the morning till their kids went to school, or after 9. And then what I would do is a kind of storyboard. So I would send them references, send them pictures. I want it looking like this. I couldn't send them, pots and pans and what it was. Nothing was possible.
Yeah.
So I think, given all of that, they did about 35 photographs for me for the book. And then I had a few which I just took on my phone and crossed my fingers, and it worked. because I used to do quite a lot of photography before, but SLR cameras and all that. So I knew I had some which were quite nice, and some which are theirs and which are clearly professional. And I think it kind of works. It's not perfect, but it worked. And for me, it's also the kind of people you work with.
Absolutely.
And they were very sweet to work with and very accommodating.
Yeah, I mean, I know them from the time when they started.
Yeah.
At that time, more socially.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing to see their journey and the fact that they've got into photography and videos like professionally. You still got the question on Bengali men. Does it fit with Minan's sense, description of Bengali men?
It's true. Is it true? You tell me.
I would say so. I would say so.
They're all into food anyway.
Yes. No, but the bit that you just sit and chat, and talk till the shop shuts.
Till the shop shuts.
Yeah,
and then you go home to your
bonu.
bonu. Yeah.
Well,
I must tell you, there's one Bengali recipe which I make a lot, which is the doodh mach.
Oh, yeah.
And that recipe Mother Shri gave me. And when I told Anjan Chatterjee about it, who has Calcutta and Chowrangi in London, he'd never heard of it. And he said, I've never heard of doodh mach, doi mach. Yes. I said, I don't know whether it's a particular family thing but I make that recipe everywhere.
Wow.
I love it. I make it in Italy, I make it in London, because I carry my panchphoron with me from that great company now that sends it from Calcutta. I carry don't laugh, I carry mustard oil with me. I decant it into a small bottle that looks like a perfume bottle, but it's not. So that it's just a small 100 ml bottle. Because I find without good mustard oil and without panchphoron, then you really can't do half these things, But
you call yourself the friend with a frying pan.
Yeah, more or less. The fiend with a frying pan, yeah. So I do that. This time I even carried Sohana masala pan. Usually I never do that. But I carried the prawn curry, I carried the fish curry, because sometimes I don't mind making it, but people don't have grinders abroad.
And so they don't have grinders. I mean, there's a bit of this debate about moving away from the way your grandma did it. But there's the other point of view that this is just liberating women, because
I agree.
It gives you time to do stuff.
Totally.
Why
not only that,
need to
these ready-made products that you see, Sohana helped me get the money together, at least to pay the photographers and so on, so we could have a half-decent product. I tried all their products, because I'm not going to endorse something I don't agree. And apart from, I think, their tandoori, which is a masala paste, and one other product, the other 35 that I tried were amazing. And I travel with their black dal packet. So you boil your dal, you do something, you fry an onion or something, and then you put in there, because it's a dry powder, and then you put in the water. It works as a fresh product.
And the oil is in your control.
And the oil is in your control.
The oil, the cream.
The oil, the protein, So I did the prawn curry there, and I carried my coconut milk, because in Italy, I don't know what coconut milk. England, everything's available, but if I've got the weight, I just carry it. It's easier for me to put it all into a box and carry it, because more often than not, people will say, cook something, and then I'm stuck because I spend half the time shopping. If I have my basic ingredients, then all I have to do is go and get prawns or something,
So, Karen, it was lovely speaking with you, and folks.
Thank you, Kalyan. I'm sorry I waffled on.
No, not at all. I mean, you had so many interesting things to say that I didn't want to stop you. And, this is the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope it's showing, because this.
Yeah. Put it near towards you, because it's towards you, not towards the camera.
Oh, okay.
That's better, because it was blurring. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Our house is going through renovation, so there are 7-8 chairs piled before me, so that's why this mode. But it's an excellent book. Like I said, my friend Manisha cooks from it. There's a lot to read, and who knows, if you're like if you're like if you're in her good books, Karen might come and cook in your house.
Sure. Or you come to Pune, we'll cook here.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Bye, Kalyan.
Bye.